One of the biggest misconceptions that people have is they think messaging is copy, and copy is not messaging. Messaging is your communication that you put inside of everything that you do. It is how you say your content, what your content actually is. It's the topics, it's the titles, it's your ads, it's your emails, it's your communication through your entire brain. It is the foundation of everything. However, with that said, copy is one of the most important vehicles that delivers your messaging. There's other things like content, webinars, and ads, but copy is the most important thing. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say when it comes to ads, copy is the most important thing that causes conversions. Now, Matt, our director of growth, may disagree with me on that. He's much more of a creative guy, but copy literally is everything. Copy is going to be going onto your sales page, your emails, your ads, going on everything. And copy is going to be delivering the really effective messaging. Now, I do believe that every entrepreneur should learn the skill of copy. There's no reason why you shouldn't, but you will reach a point where you're gonna have to hire a copywriter. Just like running a successful business, there's a lot of skills you should probably learn, but it doesn't mean you need to do all of them for the rest of your life. And copy has been one of the hardest things for me to actually outsource because it is so near and dear to my heart. It is literally my communication. It is what I teach. Our copywriter had to learn our messaging philosophy, but we were able to do it. And if I was able to do it, you are able to do it. And today I invited our copywriter onto the podcast to talk about how we were able to bring someone on and delegate copywriting inside of our business while maintaining our messaging philosophy. So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. If you've been thinking about outsourcing your copy or you need help doing it or you're not really sure how to do it so that it is your message with your messaging, well, then keep on listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode. I'm really excited for this episode because we're going to be addressing a question that I get asked all the time, which is how do you outsource your copywriting? And a lot of people get so confused on this topic and so indoctrinated into this idea or this belief that they have to be the one to do the copywriting. Now, I will say and tell you that I think you should write your own copy in the beginning. I think you should understand your own messaging in the beginning and have a good idea because there's going to be things that come up. You're going to be doing live streams or webinars or live talks or talking on the stage. And if you don't understand your messaging and your communication, well, it's not going to be effective. So you have to have a good understanding of it, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't outsource your copywriting. And I thought it'd be a great idea to invite Lander Sulser, who is the host of the Online Success for the Creative podcast and is our copywriter. And she's been writing copy for us for, I don't even know, like 2-3 years or so, something like that. And again, she's been writing for us for a really long time. She has helped us write emails in our launches that have done over $1 million. She's written our ads. She has written emails. She writes our weekly podcast newsletter, and every single thing that I do inside the company, Lander also does inside the company when it comes to copy. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. So Lander, I'm really glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I am thrilled to be here too. It's an honor and I can't wait to get started.
Yeah. Well, I think let's just jump right into it. And I think the best question or one of the questions that we get asked when we talk about this topic is like, when should people start outsourcing their copy? So I'm going to throw it over to you, and I want to get your perspective on it because I also have a perspective and a belief on when people will know, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Like when someone's getting started or running their business, when is a good time for them to start looking at actually outsourcing their copywriting?
Yeah, well, and it can also be very overwhelming if you're going to type in, hire a copywriter or go through someone. There's all different types of copywriters. There's people that focus on blogs. There's people that focus on brand. There's people that focus on sales. And so kind of knowing what's going on in your business, that you actually do need the help. And when it comes to messaging, I tend to like working with people who are established in their brand, and meaning they can have a brand sheet or they can tell me and give me direction and
Mm,
what they want with their brand. So you're going to have marketers like Brandon, right? And you're going to come to him if you need that messaging kickoff. You want to really hone in your messaging and really start strong. And so I do really love working with you because you have all those established and in place. And I can use my copy techniques and strategies to just come in and write the sales copy and make sure it's connecting with our audience and aligned. And so I think the main question to ask yourself if you're
mhm.
needing copy support or feeling overwhelmed in business is what is the pain point that you're feeling? Is it that you're not connecting with your audience? Is it you're running out of time and you want someone to just help you come in and write high converting copy? What is the pain point you're truly feeling? And then going with that to hire the copywriter or find the messaging support that you need.
That makes a lot of sense. What would some of those pain points be? Like, just off the top of my head, there could be pain points of like, I just don't have enough time to write it anymore. Another pain point could be like, I don't know how to write high converting copy. What are some of the pain points you experience or you have seen over the years?
Yeah, so some they get start to write their sales copy and it feels very uncomfortable. They
Mm,
don't know quite sure how many emails to send, the strategy feels overwhelming, or they're not quite sure how to best serve their audience. And they want to copy that kind of does all that in the flow.
mhm,
If they're struggling, of course, with messaging or branding, like if your sales have plateaued or what was working is not working anymore, that
mm,
is something I can come in on, but it's also I would be directing more on messaging and how we can tweak things,
right.
which you do inside your program, on a much deeper level. So, yeah, so I think that recognize those what is going on in your sales or in your business. I've also worked with people, this is their first launch, this is their first sale. They're experts at what they do, but they don't know how to put that into sales language. And that can be a point that I can come in and guide them through and then help support later. Here's how you can scale it in the future, just giving a bit of strategy.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I like what you said too, is like you like working with people that kind of have a lot of this stuff figured out. And I think a lot of people don't understand. I think where a lot of people get stuck is that they expect the copywriter to do all of the work. Like, hey, I can't get something that converts, write something that converts. And it's like, well, look, if you're not going to provide your copywriter with the exact pain points or the problems that you solve or the mistakes they're making or the emotions they're going through, like the copywriter is guessing just as much as you are. And so I love that what you said is like, as long as you have your kind of bases figured out, and that's kind of was my perspective too, is as a business owner, I think that you should try to do it on your own first, at least to have this discovery of like, what angles work or what uh pain points work or what emotions are resonating or what scenarios are you writing about the work. And then if you give that to a copywriter who's good at what they do, they understand messaging, they understand sales copy, they can then take that and turn it into something amazing. But I think where a lot of people get stuck is that they look at the copywriter or their copywriter or the person they hire for copy as a fix to their messaging, and that's not always the best thing to do in my opinion. Have you noticed that, like, with when working with people, like higher success and lower success with people that have their messaging figured out versus that don't?
Absolutely. It's a different angle. And that's what I've also learned over time. So if I'm helping someone in the beginning stages, there's going to be the conversation about conversions and numbers, because that's often
Mm,
misunderstood as well. And what that can look like and how like industry standards and also what it looks like if we're moving a launch to evergreen, we're going to look at lower numbers. Our percentages are going to be lower, but it's consistent over
right.
time. And really walking through what their expectations are and what I've seen in the market. And as well as like, so if someone's coming to me and they're new to the market, I'm going to explain too that your messaging will change, right?
Mm,
And I'm not your
mhm,
messaging guide, but this is your messaging will change. The copy here is this first launch. Here's how to kind of tweak it to what you like and trying to offer language to tell me what they do and don't like. Because
mm,
that's a real struggle in the beginning and not having the words to put around like this just feels off, right?
right.
So if I can guide them, what might feel off is the word, the literal words I'm using here. It might not be your voice. So
Mm,
here's how you can give me feedback in that direction. Um, Feeling uncomfortable with sales. If we're sending 3 or more emails at that end point, how to do it ethically, how to really reach out to the right people, But with like businesses who are more established,
Mhm.
they have less questions because they've sent emails at that point before. The main work we're doing, I'd say at that level, is making sure that the voice work is there and that we're on point with the messaging. And for example, because I think it'd be great to break down, Brandon,
Yeah.
how we kind of work with the launch, because Brandon
Right.
does a whole messaging document for me, that comes out with his his big promise with
Mhm.
his audience feedback. And we've talked about surveys, so I know I'm covering a lot here, but with surveys too. So Brandon knows his audience really well. He's got a document that explains to me what their before problem is, after the transformation, what they're experiencing right now. He gets very detailed. Sometimes I do jump in to help audiences do that with surveys.
Mm.
So, or clients with that. So if a client doesn't necessarily know their audience as well, or they're shifting, sometimes those surveys can help me get a deeper insight that they might not quite have right now.
Right.
But I do love how you teach, Brandon, that that is not your messaging. And should
Right.
your audience say they want to go a certain direction, it's not where you want to go,
Yeah.
don't go there. Don't sell there. Cause yeah.
It's a great point to bring up about surveys is and I know sometimes I go really hard against surveys, but we also survey our audience all the time. So like nothing for me is ever an absolute. You know, even like with how-to content, I was like, oh, don't use how-to content. And it's like, well, we still want to use it. It's just we don't want to do it 100% of the time. But surveys are great, especially if you're starting out and you don't even have a foundation built and you're like, I just need direction and ideas. And we still do that as well because they can uncover a lot of like really important things that you haven't noticed. What I hear you saying, Lander, and just correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that there seems to be two types of people that you work with. There's kind of like the more established brand who has put in the work to understand their messaging, and they're just ready to like bring someone on to either like free themselves up from having to do it all, or there's kind of that person who's just starting out and can't really is having a issue figuring it out on their own and needs that assistance. So they are bringing on the copywriter to help fix the problem, so to speak. But you also, it sounds like you also have to be very careful because you need a copywriter who understands the marketing side of like, okay, how do we do a survey result? How do we pull out the information? How do we translate this copy? But also, I think a good copywriter will also set the expectations with that client of going like, look, there has to be a phase of testing. There has to be a phase of like maybe 3 months or 6 months of like trial and error and figuring it out and just telling the person like, look, you haven't figured out your messaging yet. Not a problem. I can help you with that. But I just want you to know we're not going to write something that's going to convert at 10% on a sales page on our first week. Like that's going to take time and trial and error and you have to be prepared for that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's dive into a little bit of like how you and I work together. Um, because I want to dive into that messaging doc. And if you're someone who is, especially if you're an NGM student, like all you need to do is take the specific library that we help you create and kind of give that to your copywriter. So some of the elements that I love to include in our document. And by the way, we use this document for with Lander and then also anyone else on the team if they have to write like social posts. And what we find is you can create a centralized document and with language that you know works that everyone can pull from, then you have consistency within your whole brand from ad to social media posts to email. And you could technically have two or three different people writing it. And it's relatively going to be, it's going to hit that 70% mark of like perfect is what we always look for. So some of those things are like the problems, like specific problems, the mistakes causing those problems, mistakes they do to try to fix the problem. Like you said, the USP uh, as well. But there's one thing that I love doing as well is providing counterexamples, metaphors, and analogies that you can use um, as well. What else do I include in that doc? Is that everything, or is there more to it than that?
Sometimes if you've already written ad copy or you're pulling from something that like really holds what you want, you'll include that for me there. And that's really
Yeah, that's right. So like I'll write like an email, like I'll write like the first email that goes out to our audience, and then you can pull from that. And the same thing with ads as well. But here's what as an entrepreneur, especially if you really care about messaging like I do, it's a really hard thing to let go of. What I really appreciate about working with Lander is that she will bring things and angles that I never even saw. So like with an ad headline, you'll come in with something and I'm like, "Oh, I really like that." And I'm like, "I would have never thought of that on my own." And I think sometimes, entrepreneurs can be resistant and not want to let go of copy because they're like it has to be perfect or totally my language and things like that. So, you have to be able to like let go, but you can still provide so many different things for your copywriter for them to be able to run with, but also you're going to get this outside perspective of different angles that you would have never thought of before. So, Lander, my question to you is when you're writing for someone, and especially with me, what do you look for to find someone's voice? And how do you take their voice, their style, and integrate it so it still feels like it's them, but also provide different angles they would have never thought of before? Because I think that's a skill set of yours that I really appreciate is that like, cool, you talk my language, you use our messaging philosophy, but you also give a little bit of the lander spice, so to speak. Like
Man,
you
that's
just put
nice.
these
I
little
like
twists on it.
yes.
How do you do that? How do you facilitate that?
Um, I've taken a lot of copy courses. I study copy. I read emails all the time. It's my energy. I love doing it. And so, but I'm going to speak to voice first because I do
Sure.
love looking at new techniques, grabbing the audience, and thinking about where they're coming from. I mean, that's the main point, right? And so, what is um, the main thing they're gonna want? Are they gonna want more time, like, thinking about Brandon? Are they gonna want more time with Brandon? Is that a big selling point? Because he does spend a lot of time with your clients. You're very, on point with that. And also, I mean, is it delivered? I'm not going to sell, or write an email that, like, shows Brandon is gonna spend more time with you if actually that's not the course itself, and,
Mm,
he is not as involved, right? I want everything to be aligned so we have happy customers on the other side as well. So there's lots of different angles we're thinking about when we're bringing an audience in and moving them through the copy because the end goal is a happy customer.
right.
Um, and yeah, and who's gonna have wins with your offer. And so pulling them through that is really important. But I'm always studying, of course, and I think I've loved studying the NLPs you share,
Mhm.
and like the techniques to draw audiences in, as well as when it comes to voice. I mean, I could spend like hours talking about voice, but if there's different studies of voice and I think there's about 4 to 5 categories of voice that people typically write in. Um, and there's all on this chart and there's a flow and it depends on like your average sentence length, how long the words you use are,
Oh,
um,
interesting.
the yeah, like the
Okay,
language
so
you use.
let me
Yeah.
can I interrupt real quick? 'Cause I'm just curious, what are my sentences like? Are they like and when they in these 4 categories of voices, are they typically shorter, longer?
Yeah, yours tend to be, and as for marketers, ours will be shorter. You are a marketer, so yours is like
Mm,
mid to short, and very clear. Like less fluff. You're not going to take a long time
uh,
to get to a point. You're going to more deliver the point. You are more like teacher in that way,
mm,
would be one of your defining, voices, and so, I mean, and it comes down to, like, where did you grow up? What kind of language do you use? I
uh,
am, like, from North Carolina, so I'll say "y'all," but I also now live in Montana, so I say "yeah." I mean, different words like that, it's confusing, so if someone were trying to write my copy in my voice, they might pick up on that and start to
right,
find the flow with that. And one thing too, like Brandon has a podcast, right? You have a website. You've got lots of launches that I've been through and we've had time to work together.
right.
So some of those too I've picked up on and written out. If you are just starting out, right? And you maybe don't have a podcast or have as much material to pull from, the copywriter you're working with will ask like letters you've written to your husband or like something personal, any social media, they're gonna ask and like pull from you as much as they can to
Mm,
create that language. And it's just something you're gonna create together.
yeah,
So that pressure of like they have to get the voice right away is, and especially in the beginning, you're not quite established in that voice. So let it flow a little bit. Provide examples if you can for them to pull the language that you like from and be very clear when you like something, of course, and when you do not. So
yeah,
Brandon's had to, I've written an email and he was like, "Hey, this is off voice. It's off voice here and here. Can we more align it to this?" Right?
right,
So very clear expectations, what was not liked or the direction he was going that just didn't feel right, and struggling through it. If you don't have the exact words, it's okay. Just
Right.
saying like, "Hey, it's feeling off to me. I'm gonna talk about it for about 30 seconds, and then we're gonna, move forward about what I want."
Yeah.
Those are very helpful, but always thinking like, I'm always thinking conversion first. So
Right.
if I were to disagree with Brandon, it's a conversation. I would say, "Hey, totally cool, I hear that. I will switch this and this, but I think that it might hurt our numbers. I'm just saying, and here's why." And if I needed to do that, I haven't needed to do that. But
Yeah.
if I needed to do that, in some cases with clients, I'll say, "All right, we don't have to send that many emails. That's totally fine. Here's what I've seen if we don't do it. Here's what I've seen if we do."
Yeah. I think that's a great thing too with working with copywriters is that, if you're hiring someone who does this full time, you, Lander, like you're working with multiple clients. So they actually have a wide range of experience that you get to lean on to as well, which is another benefit to hiring. Like you said, you write so many different emails and you write for different people and and within different strategies. So you can start to see like, oh, this worked really well for this person. Let me carry that over here. And you've done that before where you've brought ideas over to us where you're like, hey, I realized with X, Y, and Z that da 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 da, and you share those things with us. So that's really important to take into consideration if you're the type of person who's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't hire a copywriter. Blah, 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 blah. Uh, there's so many added benefits to doing it. And that's just one of them. But I wanted to dive into one thing that you brought up, which is kind of like the trial and error period. And even if you have your messaging dialed in, like I felt like we had a pretty good understanding of our messaging when you and I first started working together. And then also I'm a very big stickler with our messaging and our copy because I mean it's what we teach. It's like we teach messaging. And so if we're gonna bring on a copywriter and they're not going to use our messaging philosophy, then I'm not going to hire that person because I need to preach, like obviously there's gonna be a period of experiment, like let's try this and this that doesn't follow our philosophy. And I'm cool with that. But like basic things, if your guys are, if our copywriter is not going to use them, like it's not going to work. And so, I remember with you, like I had to go through and make sure. And like, I think we put you through the program and we had to make sure. And there was some times where I'm like, hey, I would have backed this up, or I would have like tried this slide of mouth pattern here or whatever. So I think, it's good if you're going to hire someone, you have to come with the expectation of it's not going to be like you hire them and then you're just done. It's like you're going to have to work with that person for probably a couple months to fine tune. And you and your copywriter both need to be on board for that. And I would imagine if you're a decent copywriter, you probably do that. But like you can't, like if you have a copywriter with an ego who's like, no, da, 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 I don't want, like that's just going to be a problem. But you as the business owner, you're going to have to come in with that expectation of like, it's going to be back and forth for a little bit, even if you do have your messaging dialed in, and if you don't have your messaging dialed in, it could be even longer. So when you work with a client, Lander, how long does that process normally take? Like, is it normally 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or is it just totally dependent on the client?
It's dependent on the client, and I would say I don't, take on retainer projects easily.
Mm,
Meaning, I'm very picky about that. I
right.
have only a certain amount of hours I can work. I'm very particular about that because I have small children and we lost a child, so it's very important to me,
Mm,
obviously, for so many reasons, but, so I take care of my hours and who I can best serve. It means a lot to me. So, I would say that it doesn't mean you can't hire 2 for one-off projects, because I do wanna say that when you're hiring, I can, like, within 4 to 6 weeks, provide launch copy, and there's 2 editing, um, built into the contract. So some don't need any editing, some we're like, "Hey, can we rework this? I had something shift," and then another, might be like, "Let's realign with the voice for something's not feeling right?" So we would just work through that, and so that's built in, right, to a contract, and that's just what you would ask for if
yeah.
you're working with a contractor for one-off, because that can definitely help you boost your momentum with a launch or promotion. And then when I'm signing up with someone retainer wise, yes, Brandon, I usually do one like kickoff projects, but we were unique. We actually started with email retainer,
Hmm.
which I don't always do, but uh, it was low risk. I'm going to say it was writing. I think we just started writing the newsletter. It was how we started.
Right.
So that was low risk for me, and so we started writing emails. That felt right. We were able to get there, but I definitely think it takes, uh, depending on the amount of work right away. it can take a couple, like 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Some is like you can tell it's right in the beginning. It's just going to take a little tweaking and little like here's the documents that she likes to have or he likes to have. This is more supportive. You're just kind of figuring out your own onboarding system as well as on the other side of it. But I will say, and this was Taylor was around. It
Mhm.
was the most beautiful onboarding system. I loved it. Very clear and concise. And I'm a very direct person, so I
Yeah.
like direct feedback. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, Taylor obviously makes the process made the process super easy. If I had to like handle the whole onboarding process, it would have been very sloppy and it probably wouldn't have worked out, to be honest. It would have been all over the place. But yeah, and that's the thing too, is I think just being direct with the person that you do hire or decide to work with. And I think that's just true with hiring anybody. Like if you try to beat around the bush, or ignore or sweep issues underneath the rug, they're going to come out eventually, and it's going to come out and it's going to cause even bigger problems. And so, and again, that's kind of what I was even saying earlier, is like, you don't want a copywriter with an ego. And even as the business owner, you don't want to come in with ego either, because you're going to miss out on their feedback. And so it has to be this beautiful blend of knowing when to stand your ground and when knowing not to. And so for me, like, I knew where to stand ground when there were principles that we teach inside the program that aren't being followed or met. Not that that happened, but I just saying in the back of my head, I'm like, coming into working with you, Lander, I was like, okay, this is where I need to stand my ground, is like to protect the integrity of our teachings, is kind of where I would knew I was going to have to stand my ground. And I didn't really have to stand my ground on that, because you had a good understanding of them already. But I just knew that that was like my border and my boundary. And same thing with hiring a copywriter. You got to understand that they probably have theirs as well, and you have to find that blend of working together. Um, what are the areas of copy that you think need to be outsourced the most? Is it just email and ads, or is there something else that I'm not really seeing that you think
Um,
need to be considered?
that just depends on business. If you, and where your pain points are. If the sales page takes you so much time and you it's not converting as well, right? That's a great area. I would just look at where your business is and then what needs the most help. But certainly like things that you can hand over like weekly emails that really are worth your time and money
Mhm.
to hand over, those can be a great place to do it. I know in, social media copy, I don't typically do social media copy. I'm more email and sales, but where
Right.
is your pain point that's just not happening because you don't have time or it feels like the biggest drudge and
Right.
then passing that on.
Okay. And then how do you keep everything connected? Because that's been one of my biggest concerns too, and reasons why we didn't hire a copywriter for the longest time was because I call it a disjointed funnel. And this is when you have like multiple people working on the funnel at multiple times. And so you have like you said, like someone writing the sales page, and then you have someone writing your email copy, and then like maybe you are doing the ad copy, and you have a theme through it all that's kind of in alignment, but then everything else outside that theme or topic is not aligned, and they might be using different problems or different voices or different mistakes or different emotions they're pulling in, or different metaphors and analogies, and different, like, all it just have all this it literally feels like, again, disjointed, because you have four or five people all working on something, or even just two. How, as a copywriter, how do you start to keep, like, if someone came to you and was like, hey, I want to write the sales page, I want you to write the sales page, how do you make sure that the sales page is in alignment of everything else that's going on in the funnel? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah. Okay. And so especially, I mean, so Brandon, you have the messaging document. So
Right.
that's obviously home base, but typically if that's not there, then the sales page is home base. And sales page to me is, of course, like it has all the pain points. It has the benefits. It has how it's going to help them. It has our big, our big promise. It has, just so much on it. All the
Yep.
FAQs. Email is the place to go much, much deeper. So I can spend more time. I can add an FAQ that isn't there, but we're hearing from our audience, or that just needs more time and space. Like, what if I'm not ready? And how we can spend that, which you might not have the time to on a sales page, but you do through email.
Right.
So I think it's more just like the mission of each angle, making sure it's all coming back to either a messaging document or a sales page that has just that main focus
Okay.
of your big promise, um, and what your client is experiencing.
I love that too, because I think a lot of people do it backwards. And a lot of people start with like the very first thing, which is ad. They'll start with like ad copy. And then they'll like write, okay, now the people want to opt in. So now I need an email sequence. And then they'll go and like write the email and copy. And my belief on copy or at least messaging is you want to start with the end goal in mind, which is the sales page. Like the sales page is the end goal. And then what you do is once you know where we're getting them to, we can look at where is the audience currently. So now you have the end goal and the starting point in mind, and then now it becomes very clear how to write the copy to create that journey. And you look at all your assets, like here's an ad, here's an email. This email is going to be in the middle of the journey. This one's going to be like at closed cart. Like you can start to see where, from a messaging standpoint, to me, it's like an art form. Like I just look at messaging as an art form, but you can see this beautiful journey from point A to Z, but you started at Z's, and then you go to A to look at where their awareness level is at, and you can move them through that process. So I love that you say, to start with that sales page in mind, because I would say 90% of people that's get into this business, the sales page is like the last thing they do. It's like they're even writing copy midnight before card opens at 6 a.m. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you're just like kind of hoping that you're just going to nail it. And for me, I think it's a very difficult journey to write that way. I mean, would you agree to that?
Yeah, I think it's very stressful. Are already going to be stressful.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't wanna speak words and some of that, but it just has a lot going on,
Yeah.
and, a lot of tech that you need to work, a lot of planning and, like, prepping for you, mental space to answer questions, mental space to get on a webinar, if if you are booking calls, if you are, just that energy, it takes a lot of energy, that's what I should say.
Yeah.
So if you're distracted with what to write on the final day or the sales page, like, just things just end up not happening.
Yeah.
Um, Either it doesn't get edited to your liking and you're frustrated, which comes out in your sales, or you're just like so stressed out, which no one needs to be that. And there's all
Right.
sorts of ebb and flows in a launch, right? So
Yeah.
providing like a safe space for you is helpful with just having the copy be done.
That makes sense. All right, so let's just recap what we've kind of covered so far. So if you're like looking to outsource copy, the number one thing we talked about was like having a messaging guide. And the more detailed that you get with your messaging guide, the less chance of like errors or misalignment in messaging is going to happen. So again, like the things that I like to include are, what is our USP? Like what is the promise of our sales mechanism? So our webinar or our challenge or whatever it may be. What are the problems, like specific problems that people are experiencing within that promise? What are the mistakes they make that cause the problem? What are the mistakes they make to try to fix it that don't work? Um, Struggling avatar and future pace hero, we have that in there too, I believe.
Mhm.
And then any analogies, metaphors, counterexamples, or stories that you're going to use in your sales mechanism. I love giving that stuff to Lander because she can now use it in like an email or ad copy. And that way, again, our messaging is consistent. So if I know, for example, I'm going to use this metaphor of like a dictionary or an encyclopedia versus a best-selling book to explain a point, I put that in the document. So now that I know it's going to be in the presentation, now Lander can actually use that as ad copy or in the email. And guess what? Now we have consistent messaging. But had I not provided that to her, she would have never had it to be able to use. And then on that document, I'll write like a couple ads to kind of just give her direction, and then an email as like email or two to kind of give that direction as well. Did I miss anything from that messaging doc that you think needs to go in there, Lander?
No, but I would say, like, if you don't have it, you're creating it together. That's the expectation you would have
Uh,
with your like, how to create it together. Either your copywriter has a plan or you're making one together for how to establish that voice together.
yeah,
Um,
I love
yeah.
that. And also, guys, if you are hiring a copywriter, a lot of these things that we're telling you, like if the copywriter is not asking you for these things or doing these things with you, it might be a little bit of a red flag. I feel like copywriter that's been around for a while has made enough mistakes or got run through enough clients to understand like how to avoid these sort of problems. So again, if you're kind of on the fence or looking between two people and they're kind of missing some of this stuff, it may be something to take into consideration as well. The second thing we talked about was also just setting the expectations of that there's going to be a trial and error process. You're going to have to review, they're going to have to learn your voice. You're going to have to give feedback and vice versa. And then the third thing is that they should really be focusing on your voice and taking an emphasis on that. And like what Lander said is they should be asking you for a lot of different things. They should be asking you for, like you said, last letters or past ad copy, emails. Like what are some other things that you think that the copywriter should be asking for when hiring, when you're hiring
Yeah,
them?
well, one big question too is making sure it's written in the voice. Like if you had hired a copywriter to do blogs, but I was looking at your blogs, there's going to be a understanding there because then I'm
Mm,
writing those blogs and not your voice. Picking out specific writing pieces that what they liked about it, did they write it, and what they don't like about it, those can just give me a ton of insight in direction and flow. So that is really helpful too. And I will say that with Brandon too, he always has a project, a clear project we're working on, and it's never shifted. So sometimes in the beginning, if you are like, well, okay, I need 3 blogs done. Actually, I need emails, right? That shift right there is completely different copy. It's completely
mm,
different project. So if we've started midway and then we're shifting, which can happen in the beginning when you're just starting or trying to get a ton of work done, so just making sure there's extremely clear deliverables that do not change, right?
yeah.
Or a plan if they do with it. I want to protect it
Well,
in that, but like that's a very important factor.
yeah, and I think too, as a business owner, if you're trying to create like a great team and people that work and flow, having respect for people's time is also really important. And you have to understand like if you are gonna do that, you're gonna be like, "Hey, I'm gonna hire you to write like my newsletter emails," and they started writing copy for your newsletter, and you're like, "Actually, can I just take those 4 emails that I paid you for and because you haven't delivered them yet, even though you started working on them, can I just take those 4 emails and change them to closed cart?" It's like you just wasted that person's time, and you need to pay them for that. You need to pay them for that. And I think a lot of people get super cheap, and they're just like, "No, no, no, I paid you for 4 emails, I'll switch it." And it's like, no, you got to understand if someone like you hire a great copywriter, they're already working on your stuff before they actually start writing words because they're going to be thinking through it. They're going to be outlining, they're going to be documenting certain things. So yeah, I think that's really good is a good point is do not hire someone unless you yourself are very clear in what they're going to be working from and don't shy away from that. Like don't ship from it. If you're going to do it, then do it and see it through. So I love that point. Um, Okay, what else, do you think is important? Is there anything else you think we haven't covered yet that you think would be important when delegating copy? Are there any points we may have missed?
I think I think that's about I think that's about it. And those, I mean, people will write brand voice guidelines as well, and that's one of my offers too, is to help you. So, like Brandon's like, "Hey, I want to hire another copywriter. What's the best way to do that?" We could have a whole document that's like, "Brandon likes this voice, not this. Here's why." And here's like samples. Here's how to access all of Brandon's previous courses or onlines, what they were called. So if we're in a call and you used NGM instead of saying
Yep.
new generation mastery, but someone new might not quite know
Mm,
all the language. So just making certain things like that easy, taggable, clickable, etc. So those that's like a brand voice guide that can be done. There's like all sorts of different angles. I won't overwhelm, but kind of fun.
gotcha. Okay, that
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. So I want to move the conversation to talk about email a little bit because I feel like one of the things that people are probably going to outsource first. I know for us, it was the very first thing was the email because this is so time consuming. And then we actually just gave our NGM Plus students a document of all of our launch emails. So we just said, here's our launch emails. And it was like, it was crazy. I had no idea how many emails it was like 55 emails or something bananas like that. I'm like, oh my God. And it takes me a long time to write an email because I'm very careful with how we write. And so I'm like, it could take me 30 minutes to write or an hour sometimes to write an email. I'm like, man, that's like, if it took me an hour for an email, that's like 55 hours of writing. And I know the emails will shift and change. Like our closed cart emails, the messaging changes from less teaching and more of like, let me help you make a decision. And in the beginning, the opt in emails are more of like, let me just get you to convert and sign up. And then in the middle of the nurture email, it's so there's different things going on in the emails. But let's dive into like some of the fundamentals that you look for when it comes to copywriting for email specifically with the intention to sell. So like what does that process look like? What emails do you use to sell? I just lay it on me, open book to talk about whatever you want when it comes to selling with email.
Yeah, okay, well, my first and foremost is clarity is kindness in
Okay.
any sales email. Um, if and, like, typically, if someone's newer, getting to that sales point can be uncomfortable, but that's one of the most kindest things you can do is, like, "I am
Right.
selling something, here it is." Because you don't want someone jumping in your DMs like, "It's been so good to see you," and then all of a sudden trying to sell you something. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good
Right.
in email either. So just being very clear who you're serving, and having that established, what you're selling, and then, how it helps them, right? And that clear, like, you're here and how to get here.
Right.
I also like so when it comes to email, and I love how you say it's like how to best serve people, but it's explaining those pain points of exactly where they are. And you're
Mhm.
not like the similar language was like twist the pain so they really feel it, but they're already feeling it. It's
Right.
not like you're making it worse. It's more that they're feeling these pains. Let's bring awareness to it and then show them that they can have there's another world, right? There's a transformation. There's something new to go to.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I jump in real quick? Cause
yeah,
I've never liked the whole thing of like, find the pain point and twist the knife.
yeah.
Like you said, they already know that. And I think a lot of people, when I say talk about the problems, people actually shy away from it because they're like, well, I don't want to twist the knife. And the way that we write is it's not to twist the knife, it's to show that you have an understanding of what they're going through. And that builds a rapport. Like people talk about build the know, like, and trust, but no one ever tells you how. Like this is one of the ways you do it is it's just saying it's the equivalent of you being sick with something. You go to a doctor and then they recite back like, are your these symptoms are you experiencing this, this, and this, and this? And you go, yeah, you feel heard and understood, like someone understands what you're going through. There's almost a sense of relief to it. So you're not twisting the knife, you're actually more of like comforting them is what I have found when we focus on that sort of writing style in email.
Right, yeah, and you're giving them a language to speak about it too, because some, don't even have a language for it quite yet,
That's
and
true.
we're pulled in so
Yeah.
many different directions and different things. Sometimes we don't really realize what's really causing that stress or that problem, and so even to just have that is really nice.
Right.
So I will say that really being clear about how your audience is feeling, and that does mean including the pains and what they're feeling. Um, so, like, when it comes to emails, yeah, each is kind of in a section in my mind,
Mhm.
and so that is, bringing them into the webinar or the promotion. So here's what it is, the opt-ins,
Yep.
um, being clear on what it is and when it's happening, the timeline of it, and then drawing them in. And then we have the like, hey, it's open, let's go, which is an exciting. You're not having to work a ton for that really,
Right.
because you are just being clear on like what it is. Here's what you get. Here's why it's so exciting. Here's like an example transformation. And then the middle of that is probably someone who is either new to you or isn't quite understanding what they would get from it or is just thinking about it, which is,
Right.
there's all different types of buyers. Some people like to think about it. I'm a thinker. I will spend time and I'm going to like see how it fits into my schedule. I'm going to see how it fits into my bank account and I'm going to measure it. So giving me language, showing me how it does, taking the work off of me doing that is really important and helpful. Um, and so I like thinking of it more as a service to people more than it is like converting them.
Right. Yep.
It's just more like, hey, here's the easiest, clearest way to think about it and how it can best help you. Here you go. So those middle
What
ones
are
are
some
really
ways you can do that? Like, how do you make something more clear to someone? Is it just like using simple language? Is it using story metaphors or all of it maybe? Like, what
yeah, it's pieces of all of it, but definitely clearly and decisively saying what it is, to using stories to help them like visualize what it is, which is like that future pacing can be really helpful too. And
Mhm.
you've probably seen it in sales. So like what this means if you join right now, the immediate benefit, and then a year from now, what you would see if of
Oh,
all
I
of
like that.
those
So,
two.
like, the immediate transformation and then the long-term transformation as well. Love
Mhm.
that.
Um, taking the okay, so also thinking about what is in your audience's head. And an example is and you'll see this on like sales calls probably, but um that feeling of hmm, either it won't work for me and you're going to dig further like why won't it work for you? And so there are specific things that they might be feeling and just helping them through that. We can do an email. Also, it's that feeling of like it's just my fault. It's just me. Like this
Mm,
is why it's not happening, and they're really hard on themselves. We have a lot of people in that area, so being just really kind and taking that burden off, like, here's what either society has taught you, and it's not your fault, and here's a
yeah.
different way, because we do personalize quite a bit,
Yeah.
and
So like,
so just
they're almost like perspective shifting emails.
yes, yeah,
Cool. Love it.
yeah, and then anything too that we can help, because people are busy, like, maybe they haven't read all of the bonuses or haven't read clear the sales page. Sales pages are long,
Yeah.
right? People don't have all the time in the world to go through every single part. And so if we can bring a part of that out to the open, like the access to Brandon and his team and what that looks like, so um, in some instances, if there's going to be extra calls and how many people are on the calls and will my question get answered or am I just part of, 200 people in a webinar?
Right.
Does
Yeah.
it feel personal? Um, which some people don't need high touch and some people do need it. So just being really clear what the program is, what you get, and the types of success stories. And this is a really
Mm,
interesting pain point because or I guess ethical question as you're sharing because some people will just share their very best testimonials, which
right.
like shout them to the world, do it, yes, but also share sub mid level or others to show like the what can vary in your audience and what
Right.
can vary because we don't want to oversell something
Well,
and we want to
the thing is I remember, I think it was Mel Abraham told he said there's three things that need to happen. And one of the, for someone to buy, and one of those things was that the person needs to believe that they can do it. And we actually ran into this problem when, when we started selling Video 4X is like, we started working with like all these huge entrepreneurs like Harry Green and Caitlin Batcher and James Wedmore. And we started using their stories as to sell. But then it became, people were like, oh, I can't do this because like, I'm not at that level yet. And I was like, no, no, no,
Mhm.
no, no. Like, imagine if they got these kind of results, like someone who's just starting out is going to get even bigger results. And like, they couldn't make that correlation. And so when you have these different levels of testimonials, it becomes more relatable. Like, oh, you get like, I can do that. So instead of saying, oh, this person went from 0 to a million in 7 months, it's like this person went from 0 to like $2,000 in the first 3 weeks. It's like, okay, cool, I can do that. Like that's possible for me. So I love that you wrote that because I didn't even realize that we did that in our emails. So it's great to see that we have like different sort of testimonials and things in there, and now I understand the reason why. So I love that. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and to
Um,
that too is like when you're thinking about writing like your big promise for your webinar or your like what you're going to like the transformation you're promising your audience, it is important too to what's believable to them. Because yes, Brandon
yeah,
can do quite a bit with new transformation mastery. You can 10x results and stuff, but we want to make sure it's believable to them and that they can see the result happening in their own life and business within the time amount that you've given for your program.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So we have, and I love the sequence you kind of went through because we started talking about like, there's the opt-in emails that people are going to need. And that's very much about like, here's the transformation, or like even problem, here's the problem you're experiencing, we're going to help fix it on this sort of thing. And then we have the confirmation emails, which are more of like very clearly stating the date, the time, whether you have a replay, not a replay. Like again, and I love the way you broke it down because opt-ins are more of like, you have to look at the intention. You are trying to quote unquote sell or convert. And yeah, they're not buying anything, but you're selling this event to them, even though it may be free, like getting them to show up, invest their time and their energy. But then we have confirmation emails and it's like, cool, we don't really need to sell anymore. So it's more about just being super clear on, again, reiterating the promise just so to remind them, but it's also, here's the date, here's the time, there is a replay, not a replay. It's more of the nitty gritty. And then you talked also about the immediate and long-term transformation, which could either go in either one of those emails. But that was an aha moment to me because I don't think I've ever written personally like immediate and long-term transformation. I've always focused more on long-term. And again, that just reiterates the point of like sometimes the lender's going to come up with things that I've never even thought to do. And same with your copywriter as well. So you just get this added benefit there. And then it sounds like from there we move to kind of like perspective shifting emails, like during the launch. You also talked about like objection busting emails as well. So I know for us a lot, we do it in the form of like FAQ emails, like frequently asked questions. And it's usually the questions are all objections. It's like, well, what if I don't have enough money? I don't have experience. I don't have a course yet. I don't have da 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 da. And these are all objection busting emails. And then what I love too is you started then talking more about like offer based emails, which is like, okay, now the offer's been presented and maybe people don't have the sales page. So it's very like snapshot, quick, here's what's included sort of things where you can kind of get the gist without reading the sales page. And I think this is another thing that people don't pay attention to. It's like there's different phases of messaging during your launch. And when the offer's been made, stop selling. It's not time, or sorry, start selling, stop teaching. There we go. So let
Yeah.
me take that back. So
Yeah.
stop teaching and start selling. And selling basically means like help them make a decision, whether it's a yes or a no. And that's kind of what we do. And that's kind of the flow you took us through. And that's kind of how the flow works in launching as well. So it almost looks like there's like 5 or 6 different phases of emails that people are going to use during a sales sequence, correct?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah. And then closing, yeah, is very direct. This is closing. Do you want to, do you not? But yeah, I love the point of like start selling, stop teaching, because teaching now is taking away from the clarity of your selling.
Right.
It would not be a kindness, and it is confusing. If I'm like mid-sell, I'm trying to make a decision, and then you're trying to teach me something, I'm like, whoa, like mental overload, right?
Right.
So we're trying to think of like what's going through their mind and how can we get them to that best decision in the end. Is it a yes or a no? Well, no's
Right.
are welcome, and letting them feel that too. That's totally, they'll love that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's the thing. I think a lot of people, well, I think we've just been conditioned inside of this industry that we have to give everything away for free. We have to give our best value, yeah, out for free, and we have to teach. And the idea behind it is that if you give stuff away for free, people will feel compelled to buy. They'll have these thoughts of, oh my gosh, if this is what I get for free, then I will, like, imagine what I get in the paid program. But there's so many other factors that people take into consideration. It's like, what's the pricing versus my budget? Do I have the time and the bandwidth? Like, we just enrolled into a program, a sales program, and I almost didn't do it because of a timing issue. I'm like, I just don't have the bandwidth. Like, you guys provided free, great calls with us. You gave us free information that was really helpful, but I'm like, I just don't have the bandwidth. And so if they continued to teach me, it'd been like, I would have been like, stop, because I get it. I understand what you can do for me. I just need to make a decision if this offer is right for me at this moment in time. And I think a lot of people get those confused where I'm just going to say it, people don't buy because you gave them a ton of great information. That might help, but if you do too much of it, it has an opposite effect. And you're not helping them making a buying decision, whether it's a yes or a no. And so I love that that's what we're talking about now, is you start to focus on a lot of those sort of things. What do you think from a copywriter's perspective are some of the things that you can do to help people make buying decisions in copy?
Um, yeah, well, when I say too on that note, that you're always thinking too in terms of like it's not just this launch, right? You've
Mm,
had audience members who stay for maybe a year or months, maybe weeks,
yep,
and they go to the next. They're going to buy the next time. You're always thinking too. This is not ending here,
right,
and giving breath. I think it's important. But so walking them through that point of like this is the best decision from now, here is the time you would get results, here's what they look like, here's the time, the commitment, the money commitment, and what we can do for you. And then you're really digging into why they're still on the fence, and so we don't want them on the fence, we want a yes or a no.
right.
um, and that's a kindness to them. I think one client had a great example because she had booked a really expensive Airbnb for her and her family. She was super excited about it, but she's like, but, and there's, I can't, but I can back out at any time. And it's
Hmm.
really driving me nuts because it's so much money and I shouldn't, but I need to be with my family and I'm overthinking it. And she's like, I wish that was just taken off the field and I just knew it was set in stone and I would be fine. And so it's that moment too, like we don't want them miserable on the fence We want that like a clear yes or a no, maybe later, like I know when I want to do it later, that kind of moment. If you're unclear about what that looks like, so Brandon knows his audience really well. We've got a good idea of what it looks like when someone's on the fence and what they're feeling and what they're thinking. But a great way to figure that out is to get on the phone with people,
Yeah.
and book calls and talk to them and figure that out.
Yeah, we do a lot of that. And actually this next launch coming up, we're going to do even more of that. Like we have a meeting with the team later today. And one of the things I'm going to tell them is like, I want the majority of people buying from us to have come from a phone call because they just convert so well when you get them on the phone. Cause half the time, like a lot of times when we're in a launch and we do these phone calls with people, half the time we're not overcoming objections. Like I said, I remember developing like a sales training and coaching our team on how to overcome objections. And I would say 70% of the time, the person just needs to talk out their fear and then and once their fear is talked out, they feel really good. They know internally what decision they're going to make, which is why they're even booking the call in the first place. They want to join. They just need to talk out their fear. And then once they talk out their fear and they release it, they're like, okay, I'm good to go. And so what happens on these phone calls too is our coaches and who do our sales will write down specific things. So we always have meetings after every launch, like what was the most common thing that you guys heard? And then we take that information and then guess what? That goes into the messaging doc for the next launch or the next thing, or we will put it into content and like test it out. Or this is something that like Lander can put into an email and we can check open rates because we monitor all that stuff. Like internally, we monitor what emails got the best open rates, the best click-throughs, what language worked. And so we're always just letting the data dictate. So I would agree with the calls. Okay, I think we went through a lot. I think it's a good place to wrap up. Do you think there's any other last minute items that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to throw in before we wrap up?
Well, we talked a lot about launching. I don't think we need to go super in depth, but having that newsletter is really important to carry between
Right.
launches. You never want to just sell, sell, sell. So I think that carrying through, so Brandon does that through his podcast and newsletter, for that to help serve his audience in between launching and during. But yeah, doing something that helps give on
What are
that side
some
too.
like really quick tips and pointers that you can give to creating a really cool like nurture sequence or newsletter or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think the most impactful is to give someone a quick win. Like,
Mm,
so Brandon's really good at that. You give someone like a breakthrough. This is solving a problem in your life. Like, here's how to solve it, or just stop doing it. It's just like so easy. I'm like, yeah, duh. That feels so great. And
right.
so those moments you can create, that are quick and you can write them. Those can be really helpful in a nurture sequence. Anything like 3 tips, 3 things that they can add to their life, a blog or a podcast can be really helpful, a guest interview, just things that are like gives they can listen to on the go, or use really easily. They don't have to be long. They don't have to be crazy long. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. Yep, yep, yep.
Okay, cool. I think this is really great. I think this will help a lot of people, especially, a lot of new entrepreneurs who are up and coming and you're just like finding yourself so overwhelmed and stressed out. Copy is definitely something that took me a really long time to get off my plate. I wish I would have gotten it off my plate sooner. But like I said, like I teach messaging, so I'm very picky and a stickler about it. Hiring someone was actually a very difficult process for us. We went through so many different people. And I think Jill and Josh Stanton recommended you. Is that
They
is
did.
that
Yeah.
correct? I think you
Mhm.
you either worked with them on copy for a while and they recommended you, and so then we found you and we've been working with you for 2 or 3 years now. I Where can people find more about you? I don't know if you're taking on clients or not. I know you have a course coming out soon as well. So maybe tell us a little bit about where people can get in contact with you, where they can follow you, and what you have coming out soon.
Yeah. And just to be, I did not write for Jill and Josh Stanton. I was in one of their masterminds.
Okay,
So,
got it. Okay, makes sense.
yeah, the best way to follow me is you can go to my website, and I have a free mini course for writing emails that's really helpful if you're starting out with that. You can also reach out to me at my email, lander@landersulser.com. I love to chat.
And how do
Um,
you spell that for everyone?
yes, and my website as well. So it's www.lander, Lander, S as in Sam, ULS as in Sam, landersulser.com. And that has the free mini course on it as well at the top. And then, yeah, my email, lander@landersulser.com.
Cool. Yeah, definitely pay attention to what she's doing. I know she may have a course coming out soon, sometime this year as well. And so if you're looking for a copywriter, definitely, give Lander a follow to find someone who understands copy, understands how to find voices, all that stuff, plus has an understanding of our messaging philosophy. In my opinion, is a very rare thing to find. So if you're ready for copy help, definitely give her a follow, reach out. And thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate every single one of you. If you guys have not done so already, I would love, love, love to see a review on iTunes to let me know what you think about the podcast. And you can always just send me a DM on Instagram to let me know if there's any episodes or things that you do like so that I'm aware of that and we can do more of that as well. So thank you guys, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.